our catchy. One of the things we're known as a Luhya people is our catchy music. In fact, it's it's so catchy that people dance to our dages, and inappropriately so. And it was in the context of that I was once having a discussion with my friends as they were choosing music for a wedding, and there's a particular song that was very popular for weddings, but I was here busy busting my friend's bubble and telling them, like, that song is a circumcision song. Like, the words, everything there is about circumcision, has nothing to do with marriage. And you could see disappointment creeping on their faces, and then resilience, should I say determination, sweeping away the disappointment. They, in one sentence, said, okay. And then the next thing they said is, but isn't marriage a form of circumcision? Are you not being initiated into something? Such was their love for the music that they were willing to do philosophical backflips to it. But it was that moment, with a note in my head about isn't a wedding a sort of an initiation ceremony, and also just the context of the song. Literally, the song that we were talking with my friends basically says, son of my sister, or my brother, bite your teeth. Bite your teeth through it. For those who don't know, the circumcision that is done in my community is done without the benefit of anesthesia. It's done, and the only numbing effect you have is a very cold dip in the river at an ungodly hour in the morning so that you become numb. It's very public, and so you need to show toughness as an individual. Such occasions were not the exception in African context. We used rites of passage, especially like circumcision, as ways to teach people to be resilient. It was a custom that initiates would be taken away and taken through, in many cases, very grueling things, combined with teaching. And the whole thing was like, because most communities circumcise their boys, they'd say, this is what makes you a man. This is where you move from being a boy to becoming a man. And the whole concept of resilience for them was the ability to endure pain without flinching, the ability to be in what would be potentially embarrassing situations and show no emotions. And it was expected that this would then be carried on to the entire grain and drift of life. Shaka Zulu, a figure I really enjoy studying, took this to an all new level when he was revolutionizing the warring units amongst the Zulu people. They were called the Impis. What he did was he would take literally those who were boys, people in 9, 10 years, and he would integrate them among fighting men. And they'll do the most crazy things, walking extremely long distances barefoot, having fights among themselves, wrestling and everything. And in his context, the idea of him building a resilient war force was to build something probably Southern Africa has yet to see again, that was African and extremely violent. The Zulu Impis were exceedingly violent. They're so violent that the Nguni people in Tanzania are the direct result of fleeing from South Africa. But for them, the idea was resilience was shown through embedding young people to fight wars from when they were young. The image that comes to mind at this point is that of the movie The Gladiator, and I can remember them being put in the Colosseum in Rome, and the lead actor saying at that point, "Gentlemen, whatever comes out through that door, our chances of survival depend on us staying together." And that's just before our whole bloody bath is unleashed. So when the word resilience is normally thrown out in modern society, for the African mind at least, those are the images or the reference points we may think of, the gladiator wars, or we may think about the warring units, or we may think about the toughening experience of circumcision. But in a world and a time when, hey, circumcision happens in hospitals with the benefit of anesthesia, and we no longer have to prove our masculinity by forming physical warring bands to go and raid other communities, or we no longer have to be in direct gladiatorial bouts to entertain cheering crowds. Then the question becomes, how do we build resilience? Because we do need, we have the olden ways of forming resilient individuals was proportionate to the kind of threats and the kind of adversaries and enemies they would face. But the times have changed. Where there was need to face vicious beasts, now we need to maneuver through the corporate beasts. Not saying by any chance all corporates are beasts, but there's a lot of fighting and tearing at each other in that time. Where we used to have to fight and keep a straight face in an initiation ceremony, now we probably need to do that as we navigate the character development and the heartbreaks of society. Where there was the need to ever train our armies to face the ever-changing tactics of the foe, we now have to toughen up to be able to face the ever-changing tactics of the corporate, of the social, of the political landscape that we are navigating within. When the resources an individual has is less than the challenge that they are presented with, crumbling is inevitable. And could it be that the spike we are having in mental health situations could be, yes, in part because of improved awareness, and yes, in part because of improved diagnosis, but also could it be true that, yes, it's in part because human resilience has been maybe on a decline, and we may need to address this? We'll need to become more resilient. And a parent somewhere is going to listen to this, asking the question, how do I balance between sufficient reward to motivate my child and providing my child with enough struggle so that they may be able to build the sinew of resilience through life? The boss and the employer is going to be asking the question, how do I provide my team with the tools to deliver on the job, but also give them enough margin so that they can have sufficient struggle that they will allow them to be innovative? It's been said, difficult times make hard, tough men, but then tough men turn around and make easier times, and then the easier times make weak men, and then weak men make harder times. And it seems in the whole resilience and cycle, things may seem to break at one point. And then the golden question then comes, how do we ensure that tough men are able to make easier times, but bake in enough challenge within those easy times so that the men who occupy those easier times are not going to retrogress, but ever always improve? Many dimensions, many questions, many answers, many questions to be asked. And that is why we need to have this authentic dialogue today about resilience. Over to you, Paul.
I was going to say, barra. I'm still unserious. Thank you so much for that. And so to Mukiba and Shalom, it's ule atajisikia kwenda fast. Of course, we need to define what resilience is. And could you guys please just let us know what resilience is? I can't see anyone because of tablet again, but whoever wants to go first can go first.
Okay. Good evening, good morning, wherever you may be. It's good to see you all again. Resilience is a very interesting thing because I feel it's the capacity or ability within somebody, because now we are talking about humans, to really bounce back from a tough time, from a tough experience. So it's something that is both inbuilt and can be grown. It's something that can develop, so it's not static. And it just helps somebody bounce back from tough times in different ways, whether mentally or psychologically, emotionally, physically. It can be built in different ways.
Mukiba, go ahead.
Okay, hi, good evening, good morning. I had a list of what resilience is, I think it's a lot easier to say what it is in terms of like characteristics of what that would look like versus, you know, like a description, because I tried to come up with a description and it kind of felt like there's so many ways to describe it. One is the ability to allow yourself to go through tough times and trust that you will make it to the other side. But I had identified factors for resilience that I kind of could mention at the beginning. I think resilience is people who have hope and faith, right? As human beings, you've got to believe in something bigger than yourself that's going to handle the inevitable stuff that you have absolutely no control over. People who are resilient have flexible perception, right? Saya mentioned a song that means one thing, and quickly they were able to be flexible enough to say, you know what, it could also mean this, right? So flexible thinking and allowing yourself to have hopeful perceptions. Resilience also is the ability not, and I think this one made me think about society as it is right now, is resilience being not being too scared of pain and not resisting the inevitable pains of life. Because most of the times you see that resilient people don't feel like when they go through adversity, it is personal. And I think because adversity has started looking different, and maybe this is to also answer Saya's question, right? Adversity has started being less overt. It's not violence. It's not something that you can directly, it's not hunger, right? It's not actual struggle that you can pinpoint. And because life has gotten pretty comfortable, the covert little ways that adversity shows up, we have become very resistant to them, right? So we have questions like, why me, right? We have questions like, you know, why do bad things happen to good people? But I've noticed that resilient people do not necessarily take it personally when adversity happens to them. So those would be like my major characteristics of resilience. It's faith and hope, flexible thinking, and the ability to look at pain and not resist it, which I think is what causes us to suffer.
Okay, so
Yes.
with this ability to look at pain and not resist it, is it inbuilt or we have to, I know, is it inbuilt or we have to be taught to be resilient? And there are people who are just naturally stoic, you know, that we establish a pattern. So Shalom knows that.
I don't think there's anyone who's naturally stoic. It's resilience is built out of experience. You've got to be experiencing a challenge to grow from that challenge. You can't just get along life and say you are resilient, right? And so it's something that needs to be developed. And so even when it comes to pain, and when we see some people looking like they're, you know, like resistant, like you're saying, naturally stoic, they can deal with anything. What we end up doing is looking back to what made them that way, because are they actually resilient in a healthy way, or are they hard? Have they been hardened by life's experiences? But yes, nobody is naturally that way. The inbuiltness I was talking about is when it comes to personalities that basically welcome challenges. You know, like when you're adventurous and everything else, you're likely to be trying out different things. So there's people who are fearful by nature. How would I call it? They're not necessarily afraid, because I like what Kimba is saying. You need to be able to not be scared of pain. And what that looks like, it's not like you're welcoming the pain, but you're not fighting it. So the fearlessness I'm talking about is the kind of thing where you welcome the challenge and put yourself also in challenging situations, as opposed to just blatantly risky. Just put yourself in challenging situations to grow. So you can't be naturally stoic, but you can develop it through experiences. And I think Saya mentioned it earlier about the parent who would be asking, then how do I do that for my child? Because resilience is built from childhood moving on, though you can still start at any time. But yes, resilience is built from childhood.
Same question, Mukimba.
Okay. we are always on the same page as Shalom, other than now, right? I felt like there is epigenetic inheritance, and that's the beauty of things. And I think that's what allows us as parents to sort of go through adverse situations in the hope that you're going to pass it down through your genes. So there are people who do come onto this earth with a lot more resilience. Like you do find certain tribes are probably going to be a lot more resilient, especially if they were overtly going through really difficult situations, right? It is passed down. And that's just, I think that nature versus nurture thing has always been something we have constantly been trying to balance what that looks like. But it's also not a hopeless situation where you go like, I wasn't born into a resilient environment, then I probably just will never become a resilient person. But not just going through tough experiences, but I think for children, something that is very helpful to build resilience is also allowing them information so that there are no cognitive biases when they go through tough, inevitable situations. So you have to add information to those tough times, right? Because I think also we are throwing kids into tough situations, right? But cognitive biases show up if they go through them completely alone, right? In the absence of information, we'll make up stuff, we'll generalize experiences, we'll make up things because we don't have information to fill that gap. So even in the presence of those experiences, especially when we are younger, it helps to have people who've gone through life before us to add some information that allows us to now believe in something different about the experience that we've had. Because just adversity with no information may not be very helpful. And I think traditionally we were lucky enough to have songs and, you know, things that would be passed down. Like, you know, people are talking about like warriors, right? Going to war. And there would be like, you know, the aunties and the female members of the community who would be cheering them on, and they would be bringing up the, you know, the concept of courage and how that would be something to, you know, and I think that would reinforce the experience, not just allowing a tough experience with no information at all, right? But tough experiences, but with information, because tough experiences on their own is just trauma, right? And traumatized people are not resilient people. They're hard. That's what happens. They become hard, like Shannon said.
So, any of you, including Sharon, touching on the issue of epigenetics, is anyone able to just throw in and be in my head style? Saya has stepped out a bit, and just talk about allostatic load and weathering, and in the setting of resilience. If any of you know about this, I can Swahilinize it, but I just need the experts to talk about it. Allostatic load, weathering, and resilience, and epigenetics. If that motokanyo modhawadhanio can be sorted, I would be very happy. Any of you? Sharon. Sharon, do you want to take it?
Okay, I'll just answer the bit that I can.
Okay.
Because the conversation I've had, I'm sorry, it's kind of loud. My windows are open. I was not ready to be paused. But no, I don't mind though. So when we've discussed allostatic load, which I had for the first time while doing my master's program, it was in the context of stress management and chronic pain management. Again, because I'm biased in that way because I was just working with people who deal with chronic pain management, so physiotherapists. And so essentially, one of the debates we've had in class, my focus is mostly on healthy habit building and mental health. So for instance, you know, let me use examples that are relatable. When our parents used to tell us as children, clear your plate, finish your food, do you not know that their children starving somewhere in Turkana, you know? So was that disciplining us and giving us context for why we should be grateful for the things we have? Or were they guilting us into clearing our plates so that we developed unhealthy relationships with food and we missed signals for fullness so that we eventually had unhealthy relationships with food all the way to adulthood? You know, I feel like a lot of it is very chicken and egg, and I like to question Like, so where does the good begin and the bad end, etc.? So one of the things that I came across in my own personal research was, for instance, the black-white paradox, where, and most of my data is from the US because that's where there's a lot of data, at least in English. And so there's this, generally the concept of, in spite of being exposed to very difficult life circumstances and being very disadvantaged, you know, we know about the statistics about incarceration, overrepresentation in incarcerations, and police brutality amongst Black and brown people and all that stuff. So in spite of all the hardships that Black people go through, they don't, according to research, seem to suffer as severe, or rather we would expect that they would have more mental health challenges than their white counterparts, and that doesn't seem to be true. And now I have questions about whether that research is even culturally appropriate, because when I listen to the underrepresented groups, and by underrepresented I mean Black psychologists in America, they're like, wait, but the way we present depression is different from the general white population, and our issues are very different from their issues. So we are sort of we are using the wrong SI unit for measuring mental health. And again, it comes back to, is it resilient? I feel like this is going to be a very interesting discussion. The dilemma is it resilience or is it trauma, as Mukimba has just very, very, put out very well. Yes. I don't know if I've heard.
Okay, so me, the adolescent person, so there's something called allostatic load, and it's these small micro traumas, micro aggressions, just everything, the whole experience of everyone. It puts a load on your genetics, it puts a load on your DNA, it puts a load on everything of yours. You might not present as depressed or everything, but you're gonna die earlier because of all the effects of all this. Being stoic and being resilient has made you this jikaze kimwanaume or jikaze kimwanamke, and the stiff upper lip the Europeans, the British especially, put up. You might not show it here, but eventually down the stream, you're getting depressed, you're getting cancers, you're getting everything. And it ties in with what the adverse childhood experience is, what Kenyans experience on a day-to-day routine. And they're over there, anguka inayo now, but in later years, they're going to die earlier than their Western counterparts because they've been told kujikaza kimwanaume or kujikaza kisabuni. If that, I hope that makes sense. Yes, Sharon, go ahead. You're the only one I can say. I wonder why.
And no, your tablet likes me. So I mean, and I'm also thinking about a paper that someone sent me about schizophrenia and other forms of dementia, or at least that particular form of dementia occurring in immigrants who, have moved to the West, and there being higher incidences because of the general stress of culture shock, which studies have shown leads to depression. And something Dr. Raquel Martin talks about, she's a psychologist in the US, which is racism-related stress. So, we probably don't have as many conversations around these things, but these are lived experiences of like literally every Black person I have met here who says, I am so homesick, I literally fall apart every day, come home, and then over time, the fact that interracial kids feel like they're not Black enough for Black people or white, so they will never fit with the white people. And then the fact that there's the cultural clash. And this has been very interesting for me. We make it as an inside joke, those of us who are white but Black. So for instance, if you grow up with a certain influence back home, where, for instance, your grandparents went to school abroad, and then, or you went through the British system of education, but you were raised in Kenya, And somehow you never fit in with the estate kids because you sounded different, your thinking was different, you read different books, etc. So you never really fit in. And how that affects, you know, kids, that sense of being alone in a crowd, like lonely in a crowd. And also kids who are Black abroad, whether it's as international students or they were born there, but they never really feel like they fit in anywhere, because when you go back home, you don't really fit in back in Africa, and then you also don't fit in here because you look different, and so on and so forth. That feeling of homelessness, it does show up later in life, as Posa has said. Yeah.
Okay, I know we have gone to the pathology of it, so let's twist back and let's go. So how do we do resilience properly? Let's go back to the psych team. Shalom, let's start with you. So how do we do what is proper resilience? Resilience ya ukweli. What is it?
Sounds like a setup question, because it really, it totally varies, because my resilience will not be your resilience. So I do not think I would comfortably say kuna resilience ya ukweli, right? Because again, resilience is tested through the different experiences that we have. So there has to be life that's going on. But basically, in terms of how do we develop it, there are different ways of building it. And, you know, as you were suggesting earlier, you start from as early as possible, but you can start the resilience at any time. So you have to be doing things. I like what Mukeba said about you can't deny information and just leave somebody with the experience, because everybody needs help deciphering whatever it is that's going on, or making sense out of it and seeing what do I need, what do I not need, what can I do away with. So information is important. But if we help, like children, let me start with children. If we are going to help children look at themselves or be aware of themselves as individuals, and therefore look at their strengths, then we are able to help them leverage on those strengths to build their resilience. So there's people who are going to have all sorts of experiences, but because they will cope in different ways, there's an element of coping with resilience. Because they will cope in different ways, then the individuality as far as coping comes in. So we need to help our children understand what their individual strengths are. Then when they make mistakes, we don't focus on the mistake. You know, like you did wrong. We don't tear them down. We look at the mistake and see what could I have done different? What is there to learn from it? Back again to the information and helping them build confidence around their ability to deal with whatever it is that has come. So it becomes a process. It therefore becomes a process that you're walking alongside the child, or you're walking alongside the person whose resilience you're building. I have found that many times in the workplace, people are saying, oh, we're getting a young generation that is not resilient. Well, things have started looking a bit different. The Gen Zs we used to think were entitled, we are starting to think differently about them just as a result of seeing them, you know, on our streets and all. But the question then becomes, how much can they withstand? Where do they get the ability to withstand those things? How do they cope with what's coming? So there are those who will cope by dancing, by sleeping, by writing, by drawing, whatever it might be. The idea is to be very, very careful we don't impose our own fears on these children, because then we slow down their ability to build resilience. So when you're helping somebody, when you're helping a child build resilience, when you're helping a young person build resilience, you need to be aware of your own biases and your own strengths and weaknesses, so they're not coming into play and stopping you from helping the child leverage on who they are to then grow to who they need to be to manage their world, to manage this world that they're going into. Resilience also will not be built where there is no relationship. So it's not something that you can build by giving somebody a textbook and saying, go, you will grow. You know, read this and you will be better. Again, that's another mistake I see in the parenting circles. We want to teach our children something, we slap them with books. And we tell them, read this and you will improve. They don't improve by just reading. They improve by connecting. And that's where I like what Mukeba said about nurture, the part of nurture when it comes to building resilience. They need to be connecting with somebody, connecting with you, the adults in their lives, connecting with their fellow peers. so that they're also cheering each other on through this. So there's a whole process when it comes to building this resilience and testing it as it grows. So there is no hard and fast resilience here, ukweli. Let me leave Mukimba to add more to that, yeah.
So Mukimba, as you add on to that, of course, you know, I'm going to add something, akading. So how do you prevent this resilience, as words, ukweli, not being a crutch for these people we are helping build resilience?
Okay, I haven't understood the question. What do you mean?
No, as in, you see, we are helping people, especially the young people, to build their resilience. And we are walking alongside them and hand-holding when they need to be handheld, and let's go when they need to be let's go. But how do we prevent that from being a crutch for them? Like, as in, for them, I was going to say Tidluya, for them not to be weak, so to say, and just always they have a crutch that, oh, I'm being, there's something they always fall back on. How do we make them stand firm on their own as we help them build this resilience?
Okay.
Ishindwa saya can rephrase.
Okay. I think I'll try and answer that. I do think there's never an overdose of love, right? And I think that's a misconception we've had for so long, that you will spoil your children, right? By being overly there for them and kind to them and caring towards them, right? But I had this guy, he's called Gabor Martin, he said, right? Let's even think about plants, yeah? To ensure a plant doesn't survive, you take away what it needs, right? We need connection. We need attachment to our caregivers. It's an instinct, right? So taking that away, right, or giving it in tiny little bits and pieces in the attempt not to spoil is just starving, right? Most of the times when you see this word, and I've heard that word spoiled or weak, right? It comes from people who have compensated through maybe material gestures and not nurture. It's never about too much nurture, right? So I think that's where we go wrong. We lived in a community setting, and I don't know, the African context makes me happy, and a lot of native cultures were the same, is that we lived in community setups. There was never too much of connection. If you're not connected to mom, you are connected to auntie, you are connected to shosho, you are connected to someone, you're connected to your peers. There was never a time you were left alone. And that made us stronger, right? Because we did things together. Nurture is not the problem here. I think that thing for the weakness thing, it comes from spaces where people have probably had the compensation of maybe material reward versus connection. So most of the times, I think that's where people go wrong, where you think maybe it's the material reward that is a show of nurture. Most of the times, it's parents who are not emotionally available who end up using that as maybe like the crutch, right? But oftentimes, nurture, there's never too much of it. So I don't think we can be too there for our kids, right? Such that they're unable to handle life. Actually, you notice that secure children, right? They want to face challenges on their own. Yeah. And you cannot produce a secure child if you're not a secure parent, if you haven't been doing the work. So obviously, a secure parent will be in a space where they'll be understanding that, oh, my child is ready to face a challenge and they feel confident. Let them go ahead. I'm here. Right. So most of those kids, it's that backing of knowing, by the way, even though I fall down, right, I'll be okay. There's people backing me up. There's people cheering for me. Rather than if I dare fall down, right? Because that's the opposite, the stoic, right? If I dare fall down, everybody is leaning on me. I cannot dare make that mistake of failing, right? So it looks different, but I think we have coined that stoic attitude to be resilient. And I've had people saying, a lot of my friends think I'm such a strong person. And my clients say that like it's a compliment, right? And I honestly say, for what, right? I don't think strong people are the resilient people. I think people who are vulnerable with their emotions are resilient, right? Because you're like, I'm having a bad day today. It's okay. Tomorrow, we'll figure it out, right? But I think most people were like, I've got to look fine. Everything has got to be fine. And I had that mention of immigrants, and I think they're calling it right now. And I'm not really a fan of all the new diagnoses, but there is this, it's called high functioning depression, right? And people are wearing it like it's a badge of honor. You know, I have high functioning depression, right? So I can still do stuff even though I'm dying inside, right? So I think it's not the stoicness. That's not what we are reinforcing. Resilience doesn't look like kukaa ngumu. It actually most probably doesn't look that way. The people I have seen, female members of my family from lineages past, that kukaa ngumu, it leads you to the grave pretty early, right? I actually, until a couple of years ago, I just thought hypertension is something we get when you get a certain age. And a lot of us have by the way made peace with a lot of these diagnoses. You will get hypertension, this is something you get. Yeah, ninakwanga na blood pressure, right? But I think it's just that experience, and a lot of people have normalized what, like you were saying, what is as a result of so many things happening on our inside, right? In an attempt to look strong. But that, I hope that's not what we are preaching as resilience today. Resilience is vulnerable, right? It creates space for emotions, right? And trust that it will be okay. It allows space for grief, right? It hopes. The thing about resilience is that it's hopeful. It knows today sucks and it agrees. By the way, today, not a good day. But tomorrow should be okay. And I think that's where we go wrong, because we're thinking it's about stoic. And you can raise pretty stoic children, right? But often they're liars, right? They'll tell you what you want to hear, right? They'll probably not have a really great connection with you later on in life. I'm speaking to parents if they watch this, right? So you can get the two results you want. A kid who doesn't, mom, I never have depression. I never have a hard time. Everything is okay, right? So you can get that, and that's a fun space to be in, right? But you, if you consider your own human experience, you have so many bad days in comparison to also the good days that you have. What is the likelihood that your child is also going through an absolutely fantastic time with no exception, right? So you cannot nurture. I think that one may have been the question you're asking. I don't think you can nurture your children to a place they become weak. Nurture makes us strong. Connection makes us strong. Resilient people, you'll notice, like we've mentioned a lot about immigrants and people who moved out to the country. The one thing that they're lacking is connection, isn't it? They're not connected. There's no community. There's no people that you can fully trust. People in urban centers probably suffer with their mental health a lot more than people in rural areas, right? Because we're not connected. You don't know your neighbor. You don't know anybody. You don't trust anyone, right? And that's what's weakening us. I think the connection will never be too much. Add information as much as possible. Like Shalom said, you cannot influence if you're not connected. So you cannot just randomly notice things are thick and then now is when you're coming to pass all the information. That never works either. So just start with the influence. Let them also see you go through tough things. I think that also can be very helpful. If you can allow your children also to watch you through the process of life, instead of crying in the bedroom and coming to pretend everything is okay, because you teach them that that's how they handle their things. That you go, you leave your problems, make sure nobody sees them, and then you come and pretend everything is okay. Allow them to see your bad days. Allow them to see your good days. Allow them to see how you move from bad to good. But you cannot nurture your kids. There's never an overdose of love. I hope we never get that wrong. There is never going to be a point you have loved your kids to the point you have spoiled them.
There's never an overdose of love. And Lydia K, it's Lydia Kimberly, hi. Yes, the recording will be on YouTube and we will share it on our page and it will be shared to everyone. Okay, karibu sana. And so let me ask, because we've concentrated a bit on modeling resilience to our young people. What about the people who now the middle and the older age people? How do we model this if they miss the bus. Oh, Lydia. Oh, hi, Lydia. Lydia, you see all the Lydias I know. How do we mentor, or how do we model resilience to our peers, and our older adults, the millennials, Gen Xers, boomers, silent, whoever is still alive after that? Yes. How are we modeling this to them so that they learn that we are not making these children softies? Shalom, we'll start with you. It's not a trap.
I'm trying to see how best to answer that, because you're saying the question is, how do we model this to the older generation so that they can influence the younger generation?
Or each other.
Yeah, because I think the same way when you're not secure, you can't raise a secure child. When you're not working on your resilience, when you're not working on building your own resilience, you won't be able to impact that younger generation. So I think, and this is something I'm experiencing even as I'm going about running some of the sessions that I run, creating safe spaces for grown-ups, the Gen Xers and all, creating safe spaces where they can make mistakes without being shamed, without being guilt-tripped, or without, actually, I think shame is a bigger thing here. If you can create safe spaces for older people to make mistakes, then they will start developing the ability to go ahead and make mistakes. I had an activity this weekend, and we were primarily all grown-ups, and the older generation had this thing. The exercise was to do something and sketch the idea that you want before you put on a painting. And one of the things that they wanted were rubbers. And I said, there's no eraser for life. So you're going to actually do this without erasing what you have done. And you could see people's minds struggling. Like, how do you want me to put it on paper if I cannot rub it off? And that's what we need to create, spaces where people can make mistakes, learn from them without feeling judged that they have made the mistake, because then it gets them comfortable to try. It gets them comfortable to do the next thing. And then the more brave, let me call it brave things, the more brave things the older person is doing, the more they're modeling. What Mukimba was saying, don't cry in your room, don't hide, don't pretend that everything is fine, but also show how you're learning from your mistakes, because then it's going to influence the next generation. It's the same thing that we keep talking about of monkey see, monkey do. If I'm not working on something to build my resilience, if I'm not growing, then I can't quite tell the next generation to grow, because I need to be showing that I'm doing it. So I think if we create safe spaces, create opportunities, or provide opportunities for them to make these mistakes, for them to try it out, for them to improve their competence. I like that adult learning is now one of those things that are very easy to do. It used to be a shame to get into university as a very old person, especially when everybody else in the class is 20. Now there's less shame around that. And so it's building different mindsets. It's building us psychologically to be able to grow and be strong enough, not just for ourselves, but for the generations behind us, for the people watching us. The other thing that it will do, the more resilient the older generation, the better it is for the younger one, because then we also feel secure. There's something Mukimba said about resilience being about vulnerability. The more resilient I am as an older person, I'm going to be able to give space to the younger person to also build their resilience. Because sometimes we weaken by denying opportunities. The same way we may weaken by giving too much and breaking them, we can also weaken by denying opportunities. And if I get stuck on being the one who's custodian of all information, then I'm not giving the others a chance. But if I'm vulnerable enough to grow, I'm vulnerable enough to build myself, then I'm going to create space for the younger generation. So that's what I think we should do with the older ones. Just basically give them space and give them opportunities. So both space and opportunities to make mistakes and grow from there.
And I just want to change this a bit, the lineup. So I want to call in Saya, because we need to, I need to ask the same question of men. How are we, the same question, but now how are we modeling it for men, because men, as we have discovered, it is hard to reach out to them, but we are trying. But how do we model this to them?
I think one underestimated thing for how men learn is a lot of what we learn is caught rather than taught. So having like the younger men around older men is normally one way. Those what are they called? Those nyama choma, those hikes, those when people go to what's it called, to the village over Christmas and they're on the side talking, or the bar discussions they have. When individuals are talking about what in Swahili we call ujanja, like how do you navigate this, or have you experienced this? That's one way, one very big way men see and model with each other about how to build resilience. The second way, though not complete or healthy, has to do with what's it called? This thing of men just being reminded, you're a man, therefore XYZ. It's not a healthy thing. It's not a healthy, and it's not always complete. But what it normally does to men is it lays down to them the expectation or the building blocks. That's what I was looking for. It lays down to them the building blocks about resilience. Contrary to popular opinion, men do have close friends, okay? And men do, when a man is going through immense challenge, depending with the nature of the challenge, or is anticipating a big challenge, depending with the nature of the challenge, men tend to consult with the expert in that area. So if I have a pool of 10 friends, and the next phase of my life, the call or the claim for resilience is going to largely come from family, what most men will do is they will pick out one man whom they will go ask and bounce off a thing or two and be able to learn from the same. It's died more nowadays, but one other way that men used to build a lot of the resilience is what we learned during play. Okay, we learned to look out for each other. We learned to help each other through pain. We learned to challenge each other and to stretch each other to become more. We did a lot of that through play and the community and the collegiality of play. Now in a day when we play EA Sports, or we have more on our screens than we do physically, that opportunity to learn is less. But fathers who still take, and uncles who still take the time to take their nephews or their niece, younger brothers out and, have those man talks with them, it helps. Then the final way men are now doing it is, I see increasingly, especially in faith communities, is through things like camps and retreats and those men summits and men conferences. They do have a part. I do remember when I was younger, for my youth group, I started something we called summits, where we would basically spend a whole night as boys, men, and it would be maybe like 40 or so men in someone's house and talk through various things. And from there, there would be follow-up to support and walk with each other down the road. So is it complete? No. Is it absent? Not entirely absent. Could it do with improvement? Certainly it could.
Okay, and Mukimba, any additional contributions to both the men and the older, modeling for the older generations?
Yeah, physical adversity. So I think that plays such a huge role in how we handle things, right? I think Saya mentioned a little bit of play, right? But physical adversity, whether it's climbing mountains or doing your first marathon or just trying to push yourself, even like you said, now no more car rides, just bus, moving from one bus stop to the other, just taking time to move your body makes a huge difference to your nervous system. Yeah. So just being able to do that, I think physical adversity, I've seen this with my mother-in-law, especially like you were saying for the older generation. She's very physically active, and we've seen how quickly, like her mental health has changed. She started doing all these hikes, and now all we are is just determined. Because now, you also can't be left behind. If she's climbed a bunch of things and you need to catch up, right? So it's also like, I think also that thing, it does influence also the people behind you, right? Because okay, if your mom climbed Mount Kenya, now you've got to do something bigger than that, right? And especially she did it also at an older age, yeah. So I think also allowing themselves to physically move their bodies no, is very helpful with how we handle resilience, because mental resilience is definitely also connected to physical resilience, right? That's why, like, you've seen people gone through like really tough diseases like cancer. They talk, a lot of them who've gone to the other side always talk about how physical fitness and you know marathons and all that stuff. Amputees also have a tendency to do that as well, and most of the stories you see connected to emotional resilience and mental resilience also has a huge play to do with physical resilience. So we need to also reinforce how important that is for all the generations involved. So that's from kids to even like the older people, to just try and move their bodies to handle one adversity after that. And physical adversity is something that's controlled. So it feels like a nice space to test your resilience before you have to do the tough stuff of life. That would be my big addition.
Okay. And so I wanted to go back to Saya and just because Kenya is our business, and we've of course abdicated our role as parents, as mentors, as everything, and passed this baton on to teachers, so Sunday school teachers, school teachers, HR, and the church. What can we do to support them? What can these institutions do to help mostly we're talking about Kenyans now, build resilience? Sarah, let's start with you. And if you can throw in the book of Job in this resilience story, you utakuwa umenikamilishia.
I think we need a separate podcast about crazy things my sister asks me to do, like how I'm meant to tie HR with job in the same responses. It needs resilience on my end. So give them the tools and give them the support they need, give them the money they need. But I think the honest best support you can give these delegated, or I like to call them second level institutions to build resilience, is by re-strengthening the first level institutions. There's something you need to learn from home that no amount of HR can be able to do it. Okay, there's something you need to learn from those lessons of delayed gratification, which is or managing your gratification, which is something best learned at the dinner table. It's very hard to try and learn that in church, where we are 60 children being helped by 2 teachers who are probably volunteers. It's going to be hard. So like an honest first level of supporting these delegated institutions, the school, the church, the HR and stuff, is by parents and the family stepping up to be who they should be in the home. Because technically, and here now I realize I'm speaking from my heart, because technically what ends up happening a lot is what these second level institutions, church, school, HR, end up having to do is to babysit. They may not be able to fully remediate every wrong or bad thing that has been done or failed to be done in the house in terms of building resilience. And also because they're generally understaffed, overworked, overdepended on, if it's HR, they have to chase certain goals. And if it is the church, they have to do everything from praying from the newborn to burying the dead and doing anything in between. If it is school, they have to do everything from set exams to celebrate the graduations and everything in between. There may not be sufficient time and bandwidth and human resources to help you. So I think I've whipped that horse enough. The first and the best line to support them is if the first line is doing its work. But then the second level is let's resource them. Let's resource them. Let's give them money. Let's give them volunteers and let the volunteers be equipped. You see, generally the people who are your Sabbath school teachers or your Sunday school teachers are going to be volunteers. Most churches don't pay. But what if we were able to create better support programs to equip these volunteers so that they're not doing the equivalent of what our professors used to do, which is teaching yellow notes, page notes. They've not learned a new thing, and the mechanics and the tools they're using are old school. Something, what if we're able to resource our HR teams better so that they are able to prepare the modern day workforce for what it needs to be? So like, let's resource them, and not just lip service, not just, hey, can you stand and church, let's appreciate them. No, the claps won't do it. Recognition is important, but I think they need to be given like tangible resources, give them the tools to do the job, make it easier for people to volunteer, make it easier for those who volunteer to be equipped, make it easier for those who volunteer and are equipped to be able to leverage their volunteer time to help them with other areas of life. That way, when they're coming in to volunteer, they're going to bring 100% of themselves to help build these particular resilient spaces. Then thirdly, and this is maybe where I can infuse the story of Job, what Job's friends did in the Bible story, what Job's friends did was brilliant, was they didn't seek to build resilience in Job by dragging him out. No, when you read the book of Job, the first thing they did is they came and sat with him. I think for a week, they said nothing. So then they engaged in dialogue. They may have disagreed and clashed on the position, but there was dialogue, there was engagement, okay, and which allowed them to bring out various themes out of Job. And hey, for all intents and purposes, Job's friends played one other additional role in that in this moment that was extremely threatening to Job's life, Job was not left to stew on his own thoughts. And when you read some of Job's thoughts in the book of Job, they're extremely, they're strong. He has very strong emotion. The fact that there were friends present to whom he could vent and with whom they could argue and even disagree, okay? Just that a gift of presence and conversation was a key thing. And so I think if these various institutions can be able to borrow a leaf from the story of Job, is they need to be able to hold space. Okay, they need to be able to hold space where a lot of resilience that people need to build has to come out from them processing the unprocessed, bringing out the unspoken, dealing with the things that have probably been shoved in the back. And one key thing Job's friends did was they held space and created room for that. And I think those various institutions, schools, HR, churches should be able to do that. One thing they don't do too well is something society has struggled with, which is allowing people to be bored, allowing people to sit in and stew into some of these things. So you find a child has been brought who needs to learn a few of the building blocks towards resilience, like self-governance and self-regulation and order. And because a child is throwing tantrums, we are quick to bribe them, we're quick to distract them, we're quick to throw in an additional hook or crutch to them. But something you learn from Job is they did none of that. They didn't throw like a crutch to Job. They asked very uncomfortable questions and they held the space for Job to process that. I think one thing all those three institutions can do better is hold space for people to sit in through the uncomfortable pieces. And then when they will emerge from there, they can become better. So if I was to break it into three things, those would be it.
Shalom and Mukimba, do you have any addition, especially because you're on the ground? Shalom, now that I can't see anyone, so Shalom, go ahead.
I like I like what Saya has put forth in terms of the support of the institution. And I feel the more we support the institution, then the institution can support the family. Because much as, yes, we are supposed to start from the family front, when that family front has not worked, and now the institution is being faced by a situation where the child, the young employee, or whoever has come to them does not have the resilience, then when they're trained, when they're well trained, then they can take it back. So it becomes a relationship that takes this sort of cycle. A good home will build the institution. The institution then can look for situations where they can add value. So what this looks like is in school, where they are seeing parents not involved in a child's resilience building, let me not call it upbringing. When they see parents who are not helping their child build resilience, they shouldn't just focus on those whose parents are supporting them. They should also look out for those whose parents may not know how to support them. So now this is me saying that the institutions also need to be a resource to the people who are feeding them with the weak, quote unquote, with the weak people. Therefore, practically, what does this look like? Running parenting sessions in schools, running other developmental kind of seminars in offices. I remember one time doing a webinar for Mother's Day for an institution. They decided, okay, so we have Mother's Day coming. How do we do something for the mothers or for the females in the organization to just help them just learn a bit more about motherhood, to build their capacity as mothers? So rather than saying that this one was messed up in their home, the institution should also resource the individuals who are working there. So it becomes that kind of relationship that's a give and take, and we are both benefiting from each other. So while we are resourcing the institutions, can the institutions also provide the platforms? Because, well, technically they have a captive audience of people without resistance or with different varying levels of resistance. So if they could actually provide a space, provide the platform for that training of the individual to happen, then we'll have growth in that symbiotic relationship. That's what I'd add.
Mukimba, you adding anything to the symbiosis?
No, just a reiteration of, I think, the fact that we cannot do this alone. It seems like, of course, if the load, either way, we are humans, right? I think the load that we've been carrying, the reason why maybe a lot of us are breaking is because we're doing it alone. It wasn't meant to be taken over by one person. Parenting wasn't meant to be a journey to be done 100% alone. Yeah, it was meant to be shared with a bunch of people. At work, the load isn't meant, of emotional maturity and EQ should not be on you on HR. That feels like a lot of work. Yeah. So I think it's just a reiteration of the fact that maybe the reason why we are feeling like we're struggling is because we're trying to do this life thing 100% alone. But I think we should be trying to figure out how we could do it, all of us together, and everybody just play their part will make it a lot easier.
And I just want us to go back to conversations we've had in the past, and this is on spiritual bypassing, and I think both of you are on the suicide one. So Sarah, because you're our fake pastor, how do we prevent people from, especially the church, from spiritual bypassing and just doing Posa's word, resilience ya ukweli?
My initial answer will be very underwhelming, but it's very honest. It's just apply what the gospel says. A lot of spiritual bypassing comes from well-meaning people, totally well-meaning, I may not judge them, but it comes from an either incomplete, incorrect, or inaccurate understanding of what the gospel is and what it entails. There is no domain under heaven to which Christ cannot be able to say, since he is creator of all. That's not me, that's a a quote I learned recently. And when we, because spiritual bypassing is basically using religious practices, religious institutions, or religious ideas as a crutch to avoid doing the needed hard work. And anytime you read that, you can't read the New Testament, for instance, and not come away with a sense faith is needed, but works are also required. James makes it extremely explicit. When you look at the experience of Jesus, he preaches and then he heals. He doesn't, it's not either or. He does both. And so that's the first bit of my answer, which is like, it's taking people to the true gospel. People may have had a redacted gospel, a prosperity gospel, a sensational gospel, but when people go back to what the true gospel is, and what its claims and its ramifications are, then that's the first step towards that one. Number two is a more better catechism. Catechism just simply means church education. And what I mean is this. For every time in history, when you look at various phases of church history, when the church curriculum, what we call the catechism, is developed for a particular time, it was responding to the needs of that time. So when you look at the church catechism that was there at Martin Luther's Reformation time, the emphasis of the catechism was more to teach what the Reformation was. And therefore, when you come to modern times, the catechism, right now, people are not arguing about, are we justified by faith or by works? That was the bigger emphasis then. Okay, it's not like it's diminished in value, it's true and established. But what needs to happen, secondly, is therefore the catechism, the spiritual education we give people now should also reflect the questions, the proclivities of now. How do I put this? What we call present truth, what we call truth for the moment, is nothing more but taking the truth of the gospel and applying it to the questions of the time. When you are either A, answering questions of a bygone era, you're speaking over the people, or B, when you are not speaking to the needs of this time here, you soon will be seen as irrelevant. So I think a second very specific way is all churches have a form of catechism. It could be the thing they teach in Bible class, or the thing they teach from the pulpit, the Bible series that they are running should be so updated so that the truths of the gospel and the truth of the Bible are able to be applied to the reality of the time. One quick test every church should be able to do is ask themselves 3 questions about their programming, about their messaging, about their sermons. Was it clear? Like, is it clear what it's saying? Was it something people can apply after the hallelujahs have died down and the amens have faded away? Is it something somebody can walk out of the door and begin applying practically in their life? And then 3, is it relevant? Is it answering the questions that people are struggling with? When you look at the ministry of Jesus, he didn't go to generate questions. He looked at that, he answered the questions that were presented to him. What can I do to inherit eternal life? Tell my brother to share my wealth with me. How can I be better? What is this? So he answered the questions of his time. So he took eternal truth and bent it to answer the questions of his time. And the end result is people say, this guy speaks with power and authority. He's different. So I think that's the second thing. We need to relook at our catechisms wherever they are. And then the third thing that churches can begin doing to avoid spiritual bypassing is blend professionalism with the faith, okay? And what this means is, for instance, not every mental health struggle is demon possession. Some of it is they just need, they need a mental health counselor to work with them. Not every financial struggle is because somebody has, there's no better way but to say it in Swahili, has cleared your star, has has blocked your path. This person may just be in need of a time with a financial planner to get them out. Not every marriage struggle is because your aunt has done ABCD against your marriage. It just probably means your preparation for marriage was not what it should be. And the responses, therefore, to those are not just prayer. Prayer is needed, but it is prayer and then professional help. And there is a way of doing, I'm a certified Christian mental health counselor. So, and NEET none was compromised. We didn't underemphasize the Bible and did not underemphasize the mental health component. Both were able to be matched. So I'm able to help people from that perspective as a professional. And I think the same can be done in every other area. So it is infusing the faith into the profession and then unleashing people who have the merger of both faith and profession to support people in the various points of need. Normally, I like putting my points to 3, but I'll include a 4th one, which is most churches need to re-architecture their volunteer system, how they identify, develop, and deploy volunteers for their various undertakings, so that they are able to professionalize it. It's for me usually a very big concern that a guy who Monday through to Friday is a serious banker is being brought into church and just asked to arrange pews and do stuff. There's a part for humility in that, but often you'll find this guy arranging pews is not being included in helping advise the church to do its finances, or, if it was a doctor who is cleaning the windows, is not being helping people advise about their eating and what have you, so that people now go for prayers for something a doctor in the audience could be able to help. So I think most churches need to relook at how they identify, develop, and deploy talent. That way, it's going to be easier to match talent with a need as and when it arises. I think those 4 points would be helpful in creating a better architecture to avoid spiritual bypassing.
Okay. And Sharon, I see you, but before I lose it, okay, dakika moja. Sharon, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to confirm that what Saya has just said is true, because in my own struggles with my mental health, I have found that, and I do identify as a Christian, I have found that talking to someone who has gone through the struggle and knows how difficult it is to be a Christian who has depression and has been suicidal, it just, I don't know, it just fits. And that was me in the past month. When you find someone who you can talk to, who will not tell you some of the things that Christians say sometimes, it really helps you pull through when they tell you, what do you need me to do? How can I help? And people somehow, it's literally the verse that talks about comforting others in the same way that you've been comforted. It's that's in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians somewhere. And it's also confessing your faults one to another that you may be healed. That's in James. So it's basically, there are times when that heaviness that you have needs you to be, and this is without turning your friends to your therapists, needs you to just talk to someone who has gone through it. The same way when someone has been widowed young and they visit someone who's also been widowed young and they just talk, somehow they find language. And so I think it's really important for us to emphasize that. We've talked a lot about, the importance of community, but also that community where you've been through what I have been through and you know my pain, so you have the just right thing to say when I need it. I thought I should give lived experience there.
Thank you. So Shalom and Mukimba, in terms of, we are suicide preventers here. In terms of how do we balance the resilience, teaching resilience, and people noticing that someone is suicidal? How do we prevent? How do we merge the two? How do we marry the two, and how do we prevent suicides from more? How do we prevent suicide and teach people resilience at the same time? I think that makes sense. Hello, let's start with you, then we'll go to Mukimba.
I want to start from the place of accepting other people's struggles. one of the things that puts people down or puts people lower is minimizing or dismissing the struggle they could be going through, including by telling them be strong. Because I think by the time somebody is getting to a place of suicidal ideation, they have probably tried all they can do to be strong, and they don't need one more person telling them be strong. So one of the ways of marrying this, as you're building resilience and as you're helping somebody who's having suicidal ideation, is to provide a space for them to first feel their feelings. They first feel everything and be safe feeling it, because articulating what they're feeling is part of the process of then shedding off some of that weight so that you can build the muscle to pick up the trouble and continue working with it. So I'd say that's one of the things that you do, because building resilience will take adapting to some of these things that are going on in life, including the thing that has made you feel, I'm done with life. So providing space for such a person, providing a listening ear for such a person can help them on the journey to not just avoiding the suicide itself, but also building that strength, building that resilience to continue facing, to deal with this challenge first and then continue facing other challenges that may come.
Thank you. Mukimba?
Just to add on, right? Invalidation is trauma, right? Isn't it? It's like adding salt into an existing wound. Yeah. And I think also, even as therapists, there is space before, you might have all these words that you think are the right words to say to someone, right? And they've probably worked on a different person before. But I like that example of Job's story with his friends. It takes a minute, right? And I think that space to allow for people to feel and sit also for us in that discomfort of watching other people in pain, because most of the times it's because we are well-meaning that we want to fix the injury right now, right? So we want to throw a Bible verse, or we want to throw a quote that we had somebody say, and we really just want to fix it right now. And I think that being still in those moments of people bringing to us their pain has been one of the most helpful things. I saw on Threads, it's such an amazing place actually on social media at the moment, but on Threads there was this discussion about how being a trauma-informed therapist is not just about going to the classes about trauma information, it's actually about lived experience of trauma. And people who are saying it makes a lot better sense when somebody is not teaching you from the manual or from the book, and is just telling you what they have gone through. And that's also something to help us through that space of resilience, is that when we are thinking about, I've gone through this challenge, right? And it's fantastic, I've made it to the other side, that it's no longer just about me and a nice little story I can tell. It's also how I can package this information for the next person who may need it, and very likely soon. Yeah. Because often you do find that pain is just part of the human experience, and it's never some new unfamiliar pain. It's something people have gone through before. There's always another human being who's gone through what you've gone through, and it does help. But invalidation can actually come from a very well-meaning space. So maybe it also requires us as the people who are the listening ear to also sit in that discomfort, because it is very uncomfortable. I ask parents how long they can sit in their children's distress. And a lot of people, it's such a huge struggle. They want to fix it today. Let's just fix it, right? But maybe the solution is, let's sit in it, both of us, right? And maybe when the time is right, we can throw around, a word or two of encouragement. But oftentimes when people are in pain, they maybe don't want to listen to your feel-good advice. So yeah, I think the stillness of sitting in that discomfort for the both of us, of uncomfortable sensations.
There's a whole chapter on toxic
positivity.
Just go ahead. I'm just saying there's the whole chapter on toxic positivity But go ahead,
Yes,
Shalom.
actually. Yeah, I mean, and in fact, it's tying into what you're saying, where now Christians pray away adversity. The
Yes.
same way we are casting out demons when this happens or whatever, when trouble comes, sometimes we just pray it away. Or we focus on praying away this problem, or depending on a leader, depending on the bishop, or depending on that pastor to actually deal with the situation. That's something else that I think we need to resist or desist from doing, because it doesn't help somebody grow.
And now I just want to do the maumivu ya kizidi muone daktari. There's a point that resilience, you're like, no, we cannot be building resilience. You need something bigger guns. And from your experience, what is that point? As in, what do you, when ukiona nini, when you start seeing what signs and symptoms are a red flag that we need to stop resilience building and just go for the bigger guns. And you can start with you, Shalom, because you are on my screen.
Okay. You know, resilience is not about putting up with stuff. I think we need to sort of like differentiate between putting up with things and building resilience. Because when you put up with things and you say, oh, I'm trying to build resilience, and what you're ending up developing is tolerance, you don't grow. That's where you become the hard thing that we were talking about earlier. So first and foremost, for resilience to grow, for the healthy resilience as opposed to the hardening to develop, it needs to be something that is, should I just say, not just adding value to your life, but you can see some ray of hope, some relevance, some connection to the direction that you're going. So you can't, and I think there was a question earlier about people who are born in hardship areas and things like that, and undergoing hardship and all that. If you make it the norm, what you're doing is normalizing trauma and exposure to different traumatic experiences. And remember what you're talking about, allostasis, those little bits of adversity that are unnecessary are what are going to build now the mental breakdown or whatever else that will come. So how do you tell the difference? There needs to be something within that level of competence or level of ability to handle the challenge. When you give a weight that is too much to bear, then it may break somebody. And part of the process is growing and having resting periods. See, like the landing on a staircase. The landing on a staircase helps us breathe. If in the process of building resilience, you're sort of like getting to a place where there's a landing, you relax, you breathe, you catch your breath back, you rest your muscles, and then continue dealing with what needs to be dealt with, then that's a good process. But when you're continuously going without breaks, or you're forcing it and putting up with something that you need to be walking away with, you don't need to build muscle with everything, right? If you cannot walk away and it's something that's negative, then you need help. And then the other thing is, if you find yourself trying to build resilience by not asking for help, back again to the vulnerability we're talking about. If I choose not to be vulnerable and say I need help, I can't say that I'm building resilience. It's more like building resistance or building that thick skin, you know? I need to be able to say, I need help. Can you hold space for me as I go through what I'm going through? Because pain can be personal. Pain can really be personal, but pain doesn't have to be dealt with alone. The same job example, if you have a friend sitting by you as you go through this, it helps. But we need to be vulnerable enough to say, help me. And so that's what this process will take. If you're finding yourself not asking for help at all, you know, or resisting the help, if you're finding yourself tolerating things as opposed to, you know, tolerating and putting up with things, as opposed to letting go of what you need to deal with, then you're dealing with it the wrong way. You're actually not building resilience, you're hardening yourself. Yeah.
Mukimba, same question.
Okay. I think just adding on to that, our ability to know what is within our control and what isn't, right? And what is our load to carry and what isn't. Yeah. I use that example of hypertension feeling like was something that was part of the norm, right? You assumed that's just what women at a certain age got, especially like in my family line, I just had that assumption for a little bit longer than I should have, right? But one thing also from being a person who likes to observe a lot is, especially as the African woman, we like to carry things that are not our load to carry, right? And I guess, we're going to give you a lot of kudos, but I don't think it is worth it being a strained, exhausted mom, right? Being unable to do the actual things that are within your control, right? Because you spend so much energy on so many things that are not within your control. So I think that's normally an area of observation I find, because we are about that resilience and you want people to think that you're strong. But I don't know what reward we actually get for that other than autoimmune diseases and a bunch of other things that we have absolutely no reason to get. So I think embracing some of that softness, lighten the load in your life, right? Maybe not going through stuff that you don't need to be going through, right? Maybe your sister's child is also not your responsibility. Maybe everyone in the village doesn't need to be saved, right? So I think also lightening the load is really going to go a long way, because I think that badge of honor, I don't know where we wear it, but supposedly we wear it, right? And I think especially for African women, I think it's something that, especially for generations, we've gotten a little bit of praise. And of course, we'd go to firstborn daughters of African families, and there would be a lot more to unpack on what that looks like. People pleasing, lack of boundaries, right? Value attached to the things that we do. But I think all those things, they play a huge role, right? Because resilience is saying, yes, that bounce back. But I think other than, there's like probably two things that exist in nature that naturally bounce back. Yeah. And I don't think we are one of them. So I think there is an amount of tension that will lead to breaking down. And maybe that's just that space for also recognizing what that looks like for you, so that you don't get to the space where now it feels all too overwhelming and you can't carry that load. So that plays a huge role, of course, to prevent, the suicide as an alternative, right? I think is also just that leaning in. Yeah. I think most of this conversation has been about leaning in. Yeah, but there's only one Jesus, right? And so someone was like, she has been the Christ herself for a very long time. She's willing to stop. But yeah, 100%, let's lean in to each other. There is no badge of honor of carrying the world's loads on your back. We will be okay. Even as we have resilience, we will handle some of our stuff and we'll be perfectly okay handling it. I think that ideology that people will not be okay unless you're the one who's lifting a finger has also caused, yokupangumo and that stoic attitude. And it also does bring a lot of shame, because you've taken up so much that nobody asked you to take up. How are you gonna ask for help? I do think that also is the mindset behind why most people don't ask for help, because, nobody asked you, right? So now you're going to throw back the luggage onto us, and we didn't even ask you to carry it in the first place. So maybe let's just not carry it to begin with. Focus on the things that you have control over. Do stuff about that, right? Take breaks when needed. Seek help when you need to. Take care of yourself. Practice on, your own resilience, whether that's physically. Get therapists, to be honest. I honestly think if you can access mental health professionals, it's good to go for like a check-in every so often. It's good to just holler at someone who will not judge you if you're so worried about how people will perceive you. It's important to do that as well. But yes, locus of control, things you can do something about, things you have absolutely no business doing, just radical acceptance and a lot of surrender, and knowing that the world won't fall apart because you're not the one who's lifting the world. Yeah.
Thank you. And we need to be winding up. So panelists, if there's anything I have not touched on resilience, I think we've gone everywhere and touched everything. I don't know if you're still doing Mambo Matatu because the man is unpopular. We are anguka nayo. So what are you anguka nayo as we, what's your take home? But that's, it's our anguka. What's your take home message today? Mukimba, you're on my screen, so you start.
I think the same things. Connection seems to be our answer. A locus of control and continuous practice. Like Shalom has said, just keep working on what is on you to work on. Just work on your own resilience. It's probably the only way you're going to be of any benefit to other people. Those are three,
Amen.
right?
So, yeah, tumeanguka na tatu. Shalom, unaanguka na nini?
Naanguka na, so I'm just borrowing some from some definitions of resilience. When it comes to calling it something that we have the capacity of building, it means that you have a chance to improve and to build and to grow. So never lose hope. In fact, I actually noted what Mukimba said, that resilience is really about having hope and faith. Understand that you can do better, you can grow. So just work on it. Anytime you feel you're not resilient, or you feel like you're not resilient enough for the task at hand, understand that you can work on it and grow from there. Then the other thing is, don't expect an easy route. You need to have some resistance to build the muscle. So when you see everything is being too easy for you, shake it up a little bit and do something difficult. And that's why I loved the example of physical exercise or physical exertion or physical adversity. Climb a mountain. We are not saying that you're going to build resilience by having trouble come to you. But if things are going right, yes, thank the Lord that your life is going well, but go do something hard. It doesn't have to be something mentally painful, but just challenge yourself to do something. Because as you build your physical, you also build your mental and you grow. So don't expect an easy route. Then the other thing is, you have to apply the pressure. If it's not relevant, if it's not making sense to you, then you won't grow. It will just, the other information that you're getting, maybe for somebody else is good, but again, you won't even have the lived experience back. And to add to that lived experience, you have to be applying the growth process for you to make a difference, both for your life and somebody else's life. Wacha nianguke na hayo.
Saya unaanguka na nini?
Since resilience is built, we need to go back and ask ourselves, what's the raw material we are bringing in to our resilience building process? We need to question what we believe to be true about life, what to be true about ourselves, what to be true about others. Because if we have the wrong picture about any of those three things, it will inevitably compromise our capacity to build resilience. If we believe we are not changeable or we cannot grow, it doesn't matter what resistance we are put through or challenge, we'll never grow. If we believe that life is unfair and we don't have agency over it, we'll do little to navigate the process of change that is required. So over and above the need to step out and look for resilience building opportunities, we need to always introspect and ask ourselves, what raw materials are we really bringing in to that process? That is what I will anguka nayo.
Shukran. Sharon, we have covered you kila mahali, sindio?
Yes, very thoroughly as well.
Okay. Sina la budi, asanteni. Next session to be determined as my schedule has changed. But thank you very much. As I do the better thank you. Sunaja yangu inakwanga ya porojo.
Okay, so Shalom and Rahidi, thank you so much. Like seriously so, from the bottom of our hearts for making it here. And thank you for sharing from your experience and expertise. It's been a blessing. Thank you for those who made time to be here. Each one of you, tunashukuru. We are saying a very big thank you. The dialogues have now become a bit infrequent. It's because there's a scheduling change and a life change in POSA's life. Once we're able to get a rhythm around the new changes she's going through, we would be able to program this a bit more with regularity. So please kindly bear with us. But as always, your questions, your contributions, your suggestions are valued from everything, topics, speakers, areas to cover. Any of those are welcome to you. And meanwhile, engage with us. Our social handles still are the same: Authentic Dialogues with Sarah Jackson on Facebook, One Sarah Jackson on Instagram, and Authentic Dialogues on YouTube. Until next time, please, may we build resilience. May we not run away from the work, because good, better, best, let us never rest until we make the good better and the better best. Peace.